The warm summer sun cast a golden hue over the small town of Willow Creek, its rays filtering through the leafy branches of the old oak trees that lined the streets. The town hadn't changed much in the 10 years since Emily, Sarah, and Jack had left it behind. The same quaint shops still dotted the main street, their colorful awnings fluttering gently in the breeze. The air was filled with the familiar scent of freshly baked bread from Mrs. Thompson's bakery, and the distant laughter of children playing echoed through the neighborhood. Emily adjusted her sunglasses as she stepped out of her car, her heart beating with a mix of excitement and nervousness. She hadn't been back to Willow Creek since leaving for college, and now, as she stood in front of the town's only cafe, memories of her childhood flooded back. The cafe was a cozy little place with white wooden chairs and tables set outside, just as she remembered. The sign above the door, the Willow Cafe, was slightly faded, but the place still held the charm that made it a popular spot among the locals. As Emily pushed open the door, a small bell jingled, announcing her arrival. The cafe was nearly empty, with only a few customers sipping their coffee and reading the morning paper. She spotted a table near the window and made her way over, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of Sarah or Jack. Sarah arrived first, her auburn hair catching the light as she entered the cafe. She wore a simple white blouse and jeans, her stethoscope peeking out from her bag, a subtle reminder of her life as a nurse. When she saw Emily, her face lit up with a wide smile. "Emily, it's been so long," she exclaimed, pulling her friend into a warm hug. Emily laughed, hugging her back tightly. "I know. It feels like a lifetime ago," she replied, stepping back to take in her friend's appearance. Sarah hadn't changed much. She still had the same bright green eyes and infectious energy that Emily remembered from their school days. "You look great, Sarah." Sarah waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, please. I've been running around the hospital like crazy. You, on the other hand, look as poised as ever. How's teaching?" Emily smiled, a hint of pride in her eyes. "It's rewarding, but exhausting. I teach 3rd grade now, so you can imagine the energy levels in my classroom." Before Sarah could respond, the door jingled again, and they both turned to see Jack walking in. He was taller than they remembered, with a lean frame and a camera slung over his shoulder. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and he had a relaxed, confident air about him. Jack had always been the artistic one in their group, and it seemed that his passion for photography had only grown stronger over the years. "Jack!" Emily and Sarah called out in unison, waving him over. Jack grinned as he approached, his eyes lighting up when he saw them. "Well, if it isn't my 2 favorite girls," he said, pulling them both into a bear hug. "It's been way too long." They all sat down at the table, the conversation flowing easily as they caught up on each other's lives. Emily talked about her teaching experiences, sharing funny stories about her students. Sarah recounted some of the more challenging moments at the hospital, her voice tinged with both pride and exhaustion. Jack, in turn, told them about his travels around the country, photographing landscapes and people from all walks of life. "It's crazy, isn't it?" Sarah mused, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "How much time has passed, and yet it feels like we're picking up right where we left off." Jack nodded, leaning back in his chair. "Yeah, but we've all changed so much. We're not the same kids who used to sneak out after dark to meet up at the old treehouse." Emily smiled softly, her gaze drifting out the window. "That's true. But some things haven't changed, like how much we still mean to each other." There was a brief silence, as the weight of her words settled over them. It was true. Despite the years and the distance, their bond had remained intact, a testament to the strength of their friendship. "So what now?" Jack asked, breaking the silence. "What are we going to do with this reunion of ours?" Emily and Sarah exchanged glances, a mischievous smile spreading across their faces. "How about we take a walk down memory lane?" Emily suggested. "There's a lot we haven't seen in a while." Sarah nodded eagerly. "I'd love that. Let's go visit the old neighborhood. I wonder if Mr. Thompson is still around." Jack chuckled. "You know what? I bet he is. That old guy is like a rock. Nothing can move him." With that, the three friends stood up, leaving a generous tip on the table before heading out the door. As they stepped onto the sidewalk, the sun was still shining brightly, casting long shadows as they walked side by side. It was as if no time had passed at all, and yet the weight of the years was there, shaping them into the people they had become. The town of Willow Creek had seen many things change over the years, but today, as Emily, Sarah, and Jack walked down its familiar streets, it was as if nothing had changed at all. They were together again, and that was all that mattered. As they made their way toward the old neighborhood, the laughter and easy conversation continued, filling the air with a sense of nostalgia and joy. The reunion had begun, and with it, the promise of rekindled memories and new adventures. As the trio walked down the familiar streets of Willow Creek, memories of their childhood began to surface like old photographs, faded but vivid in their minds. The houses in the neighborhood were much the same as they had been all those years ago, with their white picket fences, neatly trimmed lawns, and flower beds bursting with color. The sound of a lawnmower buzzed in the distance, and the scent of freshly cut grass filled the air. "Remember that summer when we built a treehouse in your backyard, Emily?" Jack said with a chuckle, glancing at the towering oak tree that still stood proudly in the corner of the yard. "We thought it was the coolest thing ever." Emily laughed, shaking her head. "How could I forget? We spent weeks collecting wood scraps from the junkyard. My dad was so mad when he found out we were using his tools without asking." Sarah smiled, the memory bringing a warm feeling to her chest. "And we would sneak up there at night with flashlights, telling ghost stories until we got too scared to stay." The friends continued down the street, their voices mingling with the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. They passed by the old playground where they used to spend their afternoons after school. The swings still creaked as they swayed back and forth, and the merry-go-round spun slowly, as if waiting for children to jump on and take a ride. "Do you remember how we used to dare each other to jump off the swings at the highest point?" Sarah asked, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Jack nodded, grinning. "Yeah, and you were always the bravest, Sarah. You'd leap off like a superhero and land perfectly every time. Meanwhile, I always ended up face first in the dirt." Emily giggled, linking her arm through Sarah's. Those were simpler times, weren't they? No worries, no responsibilities, just endless days of fun and adventure. They walked in comfortable silence for a few moments, each lost in their own thoughts. The past felt so close, as if they could reach out and touch it, yet so far away, separated by the years that had passed and the lives they had lived since then. As they approached Emily's old house, they noticed a familiar figure sitting on the porch next door. Mr. Thompson, their elderly neighbor, was in his usual spot on the porch swing, gently rocking back and forth. His silver hair glistened in the sunlight, and his wrinkled face was adorned with a kind smile as he watched the world go by. "Is that Mr. Thompson?" Emily whispered, a smile creeping onto her face. Sarah nodded, her eyes lighting up. "It is. I can't believe he's still here." Jack raised a hand in greeting as they walked up the driveway. "Hey, Mr. Thompson, long time no see." Mr. Thompson looked up, his eyes crinkling with recognition. "Well, I'll be, if it isn't the Three Musketeers," he said, his voice warm and welcoming. "Come on over here and say hello to an old man." The friends hurried over to the porch, and Mr. Thompson stood up to greet them. He was shorter than they remembered, his frame a bit more stooped, but his spirit was as lively as ever. "It's so good to see you, Mr. Thompson," Emily said, giving him a gentle hug. He patted her on the back, his touch light but reassuring. "And it's good to see you too, Emily. And you, Sarah, Jack. You all look like you're doing well." They sat down on the porch, the swing creaking softly as they made themselves comfortable. Mr. Thompson settled back into his chair, looking at them with fondness in his eyes. "It's been a long time since I've seen you kids around here," Mr. Thompson said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "I remember when you were all just little rascals, running around the neighborhood, getting into all sorts of trouble." Jack chuckled, shaking his head. "We did get into some mischief, didn't we? But you were always there to bail us out." Mr. Thompson laughed, a deep, hearty sound that seemed to come from the very core of his being. "Well, someone had to keep an eye on you. Your parents were always busy, and I had nothing better to do." Sarah smiled, a sense of warmth spreading through her. "You were like a second grandpa to us, Mr. Thompson. You taught us so much about life, even if we didn't realize it at the time." Mr. Thompson nodded, his expression turning thoughtful. "You kids had a lot of energy and a lot of dreams. I always admired that about you. But life, well, life has a way of throwing curveballs, doesn't it?" The friends nodded in agreement, understanding the truth in his words. They had all faced their share of challenges since leaving Willow Creek, and the simplicity of their childhood now seemed like a distant dream. "But you know," Mr. Thompson continued, his eyes sparkling with wisdom, "those memories you made together, they're precious. They remind you of who you are, where you come from, and what really matters in life. Don't ever let go of that." Emily felt a lump form in her throat as she listened to him. She hadn't realized how much she had missed this, the comfort of home, the familiarity of old friends, and the wisdom of someone who had seen it all. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," she said softly. "You're right. We've all changed, but those memories, they're still a part of us." Mr. Thompson smiled, reaching out to pat her hand. "That's the spirit, Emily. And don't forget to make new memories, too. Life's too short to dwell on the past, but it's never too late to create something new." The friends sat on the porch with Mr. Thompson for a while longer, sharing stories and laughter as the afternoon sun began to dip lower in the sky. The neighborhood around them was quiet, the only sounds the rustling of leaves and the occasional chirping of birds. As they finally stood up to leave, Mr. Thompson gave each of them a warm hug, his grip surprisingly strong for someone his age. "Take care of each other," he said, his voice full of affection. "And don't be strangers. Come visit an old man every once in a while." "We will, Mr. Thompson," Jack promised, his voice steady. "And thank you for everything." As they walked away, Emily, Sarah, and Jack felt a sense of peace settle over them. The visit to their old neighborhood had stirred up a lot of emotions, but it had also reminded them of the strength of their bond, a bond that had withstood the test of time. They walked in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the town of Willow Creek. The memories of their past were still vivid in their minds, but now they also carried with them the wisdom of the present. "Let's keep these memories close," Sarah said quietly, breaking the silence. "But let's also make sure we're creating new ones, just like Mr. Thompson said." Emily nodded, a smile playing on her lips. "Agreed. We've got a lot of life ahead of us, and I'm glad we're facing it together." Jack smiled too, his heart lighter than it had been in a long time. "To old memories and new adventures," he said, raising an imaginary toast. And with that, the friends continued down the street, the future stretching out before them like a path illuminated by the golden light of the setting sun. They were ready to face whatever came next, knowing that no matter where life took them, they would always have each other. The evening sun cast long shadows across Willow Creek as Emily, Sarah, and Jack strolled through the quiet streets after their visit with Mr. Thompson. The nostalgia of the day had filled them with warmth, but as the night approached, a sense of reality began to creep in. They were no longer the carefree children they once were. Life had changed them in ways they hadn't fully acknowledged. "Let's grab dinner at the Rusty Fork," Jack suggested, referring to the old diner that had been their go-to hangout spot during high school. "I could go for one of their famous burgers." Emily and Sarah nodded in agreement, and they made their way to the diner, its neon sign flickering in the distance like a beacon from their past. The Rusty Fork was a classic American diner with red vinyl booths, checkered floors, and the comforting smell of sizzling bacon and fresh coffee filling the air. As they entered, the bell above the door chimed, and a wave of memories washed over them. The place hadn't changed a bit. Same old jukebox in the corner, same framed photos of local sports teams on the walls, and even the same waitress, Mrs. Henderson, who greeted them with a warm smile. "Look who it is!" Mrs. Henderson exclaimed, her eyes lighting up as she recognized them. "The old gang's back together. What brings you all to town?" "We're having a little reunion," Emily explained, smiling. "It's good to be back." Mrs. Henderson nodded, her expression turning nostalgic. "I remember when you three used to sit in that corner booth for hours, talking about your dreams. It's good to see you still sticking together." She led them to their usual booth, and they settled in, picking up the menus even though they already knew what they wanted. As they waited for their food, the conversation turned to more serious matters. "So, what's really been going on with you guys?" Jack asked, his tone more serious now. "I mean, we've talked about the good stuff, but I know life's been throwing some curveballs too." Sarah sighed, running a hand through her hair. "It's been tough, Jack. It's overwhelming. The hospital is understaffed, and every day feels like a marathon. I'm on my feet for hours, dealing with emergencies, and it's starting to get to me. I love helping people, but I'm so tired all the time. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." Emily reached across the table to squeeze Sarah's hand. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. That sounds really hard. Have you thought about taking some time off?" Sarah shook her head. "I can't. They need me there. But it's getting to the point where I'm not sure if I'm doing more harm than good. I'm so exhausted that I'm making mistakes, and that's dangerous." Jack frowned, his brow furrowing with concern. "You need to take care of yourself, Sarah. You can't pour from an empty cup. Maybe you should talk to your supervisor about getting some help or reducing your hours." Sarah nodded, though her expression remained troubled. "I know you're right, but it's hard. I feel like I'm letting everyone down if I don't give it my all." As they spoke, the door to the diner opened, and the sound of footsteps echoed through the room. Emily looked up absent-mindedly, her gaze sweeping over the new arrivals, when her eyes suddenly widened in shock. Standing in the doorway was Michael, her ex-boyfriend. Michael hadn't changed much since the last time she'd seen him. He was still tall, with the same sandy blonde hair and piercing blue eyes that had once made her heart skip a beat. But there was something different about him now, a certain weariness in his expression, as if life had taken its toll on him too. For a moment their eyes met, and the memories of their difficult breakup came rushing back. The late-night arguments, the tears, the feeling of betrayal when they realized they wanted different things in life. It had been a painful chapter in Emily's life, one she had worked hard to move past. Michael hesitated, clearly caught off guard by seeing her. But after a moment, he gave a small nod of acknowledgement and made his way to the counter, ordering a coffee to go. Emily's heart raced as she watched him, unsure of what to do. The memories were still raw, and she wasn't ready to confront them, or him. "Emily," Sarah's voice brought her back to the present. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Emily shook her head, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, just someone I wasn't expecting to see." Jack followed her gaze, and his expression darkened slightly. "Is that Michael?" Emily nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, it's him." Sarah looked between them, concern etched on her face. "Do you want to leave? We can go somewhere else if it's too much." Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "No, it's okay. I just wasn't prepared to see him. It's been a long time, but it still hurts." Jack reached across the table to give her a reassuring pat on the back. "You don't have to talk to him if you don't want to. We're here for you, Em." Emily nodded, grateful for their support. "Thanks, guys. I think I just need a moment." Michael took his coffee and turned to leave, but before he reached the door, he hesitated. He looked over at Emily, a conflicted expression on his face, as if he was debating whether to say something or just walk away. Finally, he approached their table, his steps slow and uncertain. "Emily," he said softly, his voice tinged with regret, "I didn't expect to see you here. How have you been?" Emily forced a smile, her emotions swirling inside her. "I've been okay. How about you?" Michael shrugged, looking down at his coffee. Same old, same old. Life's been challenging." The tension in the air was palpable, and Emily wasn't sure what to say. Part of her wanted to ask him why he had to bring up the past, while another part of her wanted to just let it go and move on. Sarah and Jack exchanged a glance, sensing the awkwardness of the situation. Sarah cleared her throat and gave Michael a polite nod. "It's nice to see you, Michael. We were just catching up. Maybe we can do this another time." Michael nodded, understanding the hint. "Yeah, of course. I didn't mean to intrude. It was good seeing you, Emily. Take care." With that, he turned and left the diner, the door closing softly behind him. Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her hands trembling slightly. "Are you okay?" Jack asked gently, his concern evident. Emily nodded, though she didn't feel as strong as she pretended. "I'm fine. It's just seeing him again brought back a lot of memories. I thought I was over it, but I guess some wounds take longer to heal." Sarah reached out, placing a comforting hand on Emily's arm. "It's okay to feel that way, Emily. You don't have to pretend everything's fine if it's not. We're here for you." Emily looked at her friends, feeling a surge of gratitude. "I know, and I'm so thankful for you both. It's just, I don't know. I guess I've been carrying this weight around for so long, and seeing him again made me realize I haven't fully let go." Jack leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe it's time to face those feelings, Em. Not for him, but for yourself. You deserve to move on and find peace." Emily nodded slowly, knowing he was right. "Maybe you're right. It's just hard to know where to start." The waitress arrived with their food, breaking the tension with the clatter of plates and the smell of freshly grilled burgers. As they dug into their meals, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, but the underlying current of unresolved emotions remained. After a few bites, Jack set down his burger and sighed. "You know, I've been doing a lot of thinking too. About my life, my career. It's not what I thought it would be. I mean, I love photography, but something's missing. I thought traveling and capturing beautiful moments would be enough, but lately I've felt unfulfilled. Sarah looked at him sympathetically. What do you think is missing, Jack? Jack shook his head, a hint of frustration in his voice. I don't know. Purpose, maybe? I used to think capturing beauty was enough, but now I'm not so sure. I feel like I'm just drifting, not really making a difference. Emily listened, her heart going out to him. You've always been so passionate about photography, Jack. Maybe it's time to explore new ways to use your talent. Have you thought about teaching, or maybe using your photography to support a cause you care about? Jack's expression softened as he considered her words. I haven't thought about that, but maybe you're right. I've been so focused on the art itself that I've forgotten about the impact it can have. Maybe I need to find a way to make my work mean something more. Sarah nodded in agreement. That sounds like a great idea, Jack. You have so much to offer, and I think finding a way to connect your passion with a purpose could be really fulfilling. The conversation continued, the three friends opening up to each other about their struggles, fears, and hopes for the future. It was a cathartic experience, one that brought them even closer together. As the night wore on, they finished their meals and paid the bill, leaving the diner with full stomachs and lighter hearts. The challenges they faced were still there, but somehow they felt more manageable now that they had shared them with each other. Walking back to their cars, Emily looked up at the night sky, the stars twinkling like tiny beacons of hope. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Sarah and Jack by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came next. Thanks for tonight, she said softly, breaking the comfortable silence. I needed this. I needed you both. Sarah smiled, linking arms with her. We're always here for you, Emily, no matter what. Jack nodded, his voice warm and reassuring. We're in this together, Em. We've got your back. And with that, they walked on, the challenges of the past and the uncertainties of the future seeming a little less daunting, knowing they had each other to lean on. The evening sky over Willow Creek was a canvas of deep purples and blues, with the last traces of sunlight fading into the horizon. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of pine and earth as Emily, Sarah, and Jack made their way to the lake on the outskirts of town. It was a place they had visited often as kids, a secluded spot surrounded by towering trees where they could sit on the grassy shore and watch the moonlight dance on the water's surface. Tonight, they had decided to return to the lake, seeking the comfort and privacy it offered. The events of the past few days had stirred up a lot of emotions, and they knew it was time to talk about them. As they reached the shore, the lake stretched out before them, calm and serene, reflecting the stars above like a mirror. It's beautiful here, Sarah said softly, as she spread out a blanket on the grass and sat down. The others joined her, and for a moment, they simply sat in silence, taking in the peaceful surroundings. Emily hugged her knees to her chest, her gaze fixed on the water. I used to come here a lot after school, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It was my escape, my place to think. I'd watch the sunset and wonder what life would be like when we grew up. Jack leaned back on his elbows, looking up at the sky. I remember those days. We used to dream about the future, about all the things we'd do and places we'd go. It felt like the world was full of endless possibilities. But now, Sarah added, her tone tinged with melancholy, it feels like those dreams are so far away, like we've been caught up in the routine of life, and somewhere along the way, We lost sight of what really matters. Emily nodded, a heavy sigh escaping her lips. I know what you mean. I've been thinking a lot about that lately, about how different my life is from what I imagined. Don't get me wrong, I love teaching, but I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm just going through the motions. Jack shifted slightly, turning to face them. I get it. I thought traveling and taking photos would be the dream life, but now I'm starting to wonder if it's enough. There's a part of me that feels empty, like there's something more I should be doing, but I don't know what that is. Sarah hugged herself, her eyes reflecting the sadness in her heart. I feel the same way. I went into nursing because I wanted to help people, to make a difference. But lately, all I feel is tired. The pressure, the stress, it's so overwhelming. I'm scared that if I keep going like this, I'll burn out completely. The three friends fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts. The stillness of the night enveloped them, broken only by the soft rustling of leaves and the occasional chirping of crickets. The weight of their unspoken fears and regrets hung heavy in the air, pressing down on them like a suffocating blanket. I've made so many mistakes, Emily finally admitted, her voice trembling. I've let my fears hold me back, and I've missed out on so much because of it. I was so afraid of failing that I never even tried to pursue some of my dreams, and now I'm afraid it's too late. Sarah reached out and took Emily's hand, squeezing it gently. It's never too late, Emily. We're still young, and we still have time to change things. But I understand how you feel. I've made mistakes too, big ones. There are days when I wonder if I chose the wrong path, if I should have done something different with my life. Jack nodded solemnly, his own regrets weighing heavily on his mind. I've been thinking about the choices I've made too. I left behind a lot of relationships, a lot of opportunities, because I was so focused on my career. And now, looking back, I wonder if I was wrong, if I've missed out on the things that really matter, like love and family and stability. The honesty of their conversation was both liberating and painful. For so long, they had carried these burdens alone, afraid to admit their vulnerabilities, even to each other. But now, sitting by the lake in the darkness, with only the stars as witnesses, they found the courage to open up, to let their guard down and share their deepest fears and regrets. We've all made mistakes, Sarah said softly, her voice filled with compassion. But those mistakes don't define us. They're just a part of our journey, and we don't have to face them alone. We have each other, and that's what really matters. Emily looked at her friends, her eyes filling with tears. Thank you, both of you. I don't know what I'd do without you. You've been my rock, even when I didn't realize it. I'm so grateful to have you in my life. Jack smiled, his own emotions threatening to overwhelm him. We've been through so much together, and we've come out stronger because of it. I know it hasn't been easy, but I wouldn't trade our friendship for anything in the world. As the night grew darker, they continued to talk, their voices blending with the sounds of nature around them. They talked about their fears, of failure, of loneliness, of not being enough. They talked about their regrets, about the chances they didn't take, the words they didn't say, the relationships they let slip away. And they talked about their hopes for the future, the dreams they still held on to, the changes they wanted to make, the lives they still hoped to build. In that moment, as they bared their souls to each other, they realized something profound. They weren't alone in their struggles. They were all facing the same challenges, the same doubts, the same fears. And that knowledge brought them closer together, strengthening the bond that had always been there, but had grown even stronger over time. We've got each other's backs, Jack said firmly, his voice full of determination. No matter what happens, we'll get through it together. We'll figure it out, one step at a time. Sarah nodded, her eyes shining with resolve. We've faced tough times before, and we've come out stronger. We can do it again. And this time, we'll make sure we're supporting each other every step of the way. Emily smiled through her tears, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. We're not alone, she said softly, more to herself than to anyone else. We're never alone as long as we have each other. The three friends sat by the lake for a while longer, their conversation gradually fading into comfortable silence. The weight of their fears and regrets had lifted, replaced by a sense of hope and renewal. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they were ready to face it, together. As they finally stood up to leave, the moon was high in the sky, casting a soft, silver light over the lake. The world around them was quiet and still, as if holding its breath, waiting for the dawn. "Let's make a promise," Sarah said as they walked back to their cars. "Let's promise to keep talking like this, to be honest with each other about how we're feeling, and to support each other no matter what." Jack and Emily nodded in agreement, their hearts full of gratitude for the friendship they shared. "It's a promise," Jack said with a smile. "No more hiding, no more pretending. We're in this together." As they parted ways for the night, they knew that their bond had been strengthened, their resolve renewed. The challenges they faced were still there, but they no longer seemed insurmountable. They had each other, and that was all they needed. And as they drove away from the lake, the first hints of dawn began to appear on the horizon, a reminder that even the darkest night is always followed by the light of a new day. The sun rose over Willow Creek, casting a warm golden light across the town as a new day began. It was the last day of their reunion, and the air was filled with a bittersweet sense of both closure and new beginnings. Emily, Sarah, and Jack had spent the past few days revisiting their old memories, confronting their fears, and sharing their deepest thoughts. Now, it was time to take what they had learned and move forward with their lives. Emily woke up early, the soft morning light filtering through the curtains of her childhood bedroom. She sat up in bed, feeling a sense of clarity that had been absent for a long time. The conversation by the lake had been a turning point for her, and she knew what she needed to do next. After a quick shower and a cup of coffee, Emily found herself dialing a familiar number. Her heart pounded as the phone rang, but she knew this was something she had to do for herself. "Hello." Michael's voice on the other end of the line was cautious, uncertain. "Hi, Michael. It's Emily," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves she felt. "I was wondering if we could meet up today. There are some things I'd like to talk about." There was a brief pause before he replied, "Sure, Emily. I think we both have some things to say. How about we meet at the park in an hour?" "Sounds good. See you there." An hour later, Emily stood in the park, the cool breeze rustling the leaves above her. She spotted Michael walking toward her, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel a pang of anger or sadness. Instead, she felt calm, ready to let go of the past and move forward. They sat down on a bench, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Michael spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about what happened. I know I hurt you, Emily, and I'm sorry. I never meant for things to end the way they did." Emily nodded, her expression soft. "I know, Michael, and I've spent a lot of time being angry, but I've realized that holding on to that anger isn't helping anyone, especially not me. I want to move on, and I want to forgive you." Michael looked at her, surprise and relief evident in his eyes. "Thank you, Emily. That means a lot to me. I hope you can find happiness, and I want you to know that I wish you all the best." Emily smiled, a weight lifting from her shoulders. "Thank you, Michael. I wish you the same. I think it's time for both of us to let go of the past and focus on the future." They parted on good terms. The tension and unresolved emotions between them finally laid to rest. Emily felt lighter as she walked back to her car, the sense of closure giving her a newfound sense of freedom. Meanwhile, Sarah sat in a cozy cafe, a cup of tea in front of her as she stared out the window. The decision to take a break from work hadn't been easy, but she knew it was the right one. The conversation with her friends had made her realize that she needed to prioritize her own well-being, even if it meant stepping away from the job she loved for a while. She had already spoken to her supervisor, who had been surprisingly understanding. They had agreed on a leave of absence, giving Sarah the time she needed to rest and recharge. Now, as she sat in the cafe, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in months. Her phone buzzed with a message from Emily. "How did it go with your boss?" Sarah smiled as she typed back. "It went well. I'm taking some time off to focus on myself. Thank you for your support. I couldn't have done it without you." Emily's reply was immediate. "I'm so proud of you, Sarah. You deserve this. Let's celebrate tonight." Jack, on the other hand, was in his element, his camera in hand, as he explored the streets of Willow Creek. He had woken up with a sense of purpose, inspired by the conversation with Emily and Sarah. The idea of using his photography to make a difference had sparked something in him, and he was eager to see where it would lead. As he wandered through the town, capturing images of the familiar streets, the people, and the places that held so many memories, he felt a renewed passion for his work. He knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in his career, one where his art could have a meaningful impact on the world. Later that day, the three friends met up for one last visit to Mr. Thompson's house. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden glow over the neighborhood as they walked up to the familiar porch. Mr. Thompson was waiting for them, his face lighting up with a smile as they approached. "There they are, my three favorite people," he said, his voice full of affection. "Come on in. I've got something for you." They followed him inside, where he led them to the living room. On the coffee table were three small boxes, each with a name written on it in Mr. Thompson's neat handwriting. "I've been doing some cleaning, and I found these," he explained. "They're little keepsakes from when you were kids. I thought you might like to have them." Emily, Sarah, and Jack each took a box, their hearts swelling with emotion as they opened them. Inside were small trinkets from their childhood, a faded photograph, a toy, a note written in crayon. Each item was a reminder of the bond they had shared and the memories they had created together. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," Sarah said, her voice choked with emotion. "This means so much to us." Mr. Thompson smiled, his eyes twinkling with warmth. "You three were like my own grandkids. Watching you grow up, seeing the people you've become, it's been one of the greatest joys of my life." They spent some time reminiscing, sharing stories and laughter as the evening wore on. But as the sky darkened, they knew it was time to say goodbye. Mr. Thompson walked them to the door, his expression thoughtful as he looked at each of them. "Before you go," he said, his voice gentle, "I want to give you one last piece of advice. Life moves fast, and before you know it, years have gone by. So cherish every moment, my dear ones, for time passes quickly." The friends nodded, taking his words to heart. They hugged Mr. Thompson tightly, promising to visit again soon. As they left the house, the night air was cool, and the stars were beginning to twinkle in the sky. The town of Willow Creek was quiet, the streets bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. They walked in silence for a while, each lost in their thoughts, the weight of the day's events settling over them. But it was a comfortable silence, one filled with the knowledge that they were all moving forward, ready to face whatever the future held. Finally, Emily spoke. "This has been an amazing few days. I'm so grateful to have you both in my life. I don't know what I'd do without you." Sarah smiled, linking arms with her. "We're always here for each other, Em. No matter where life takes us, we'll always have this." Jack nodded, his voice full of warmth. "This isn't the end, it's just the beginning. We're all heading in different directions, but that doesn't mean we're saying goodbye. We'll stay in touch, we'll support each other, and we'll keep moving forward." They stopped at the corner where their paths would diverge, each heading back to their own lives, their own futures. But before they parted ways, they embraced one last time, holding on a little longer, knowing that while things would change, their friendship would remain a constant in their lives. "Take care of yourselves," Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. "And remember, no matter what, we're always here for each other." Sarah and Jack nodded, their eyes shining with unshed tears. "Always," they echoed. And with that, they turned and walked away, each heading toward their own future, but with the promise of staying connected, of continuing to support each other no matter where life took them. As they disappeared into the night, the town of Willow Creek stood quietly behind them, a place of memories, of growth, and of friendship. And as the stars shone brightly above, they knew that they were ready to face whatever came next, together in spirit, if not in distance.